Hello and welcome to StackStorm 101. Today I'm going to show you the basics of using the StackStorm system. I'm going to go ahead and start off here on the command line and show you through a few of the features that it has. And then we'll also show the web-based user interface. So the command line utility for StackStorm is st2. So if we do an st2 -- version, we can see that I'm running 0.12.0 on this particular host. An st2-h will show us all of the functionality that we have available from the command line utility. So you can see that you have the ability to access all of your actions, authenticate, your execution history, run actions, look at your rules or sensors or triggers, all sorts of information. So pretty much anything that you can do or manage with StackStorm can be accessed via the CLI. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do today is I'm actually going to need to authenticate. So if I do st2 auth test u, because this is my test user, it'll prompt me for a password. And then it gives me a token. So what I can do is take this token and I can actually set this as an environment variable. And this will allow me to remain authenticated for the life of the token or the life of my session, whichever ends first. So now we can do an st2 action list. And I should mention that I don't mind actually showing this token within the video because this is a throwaway host that'll be gone once the video's over. So st2 action list shows me all of the actions that I have actually registered within this system. So if we narrow that down to a single pack, we'll see these are the core actions that are shipped with the StackStorm system. So out of the box, we offer things like running a local shell command, running a remote shell command, both with or without elevated privileges, making an HTTP call, running an arbitrary Windows command, or an interface to send mail if you happen to have that installed. So these are the basic actions you'll see within the core pack. Okay, next I'd like to jump over and take a look at the trigger list. So we do st2 trigger list. See all the triggers that are registered here in my system. Triggers are emitted by sensors in order to be consumed by rules so that you can then fire off automations, fire off actions and workflows automatically. That seems a little bit obtuse, but it'll make a little bit more sense as we go along here and I show you a sample rule and things like that. The basic core triggers that you see in the system, a number of them are useful for things like internal notifications. So say you have an action that runs and you want to take another action at the end of that. Every time it happens, whether it succeeds or fails, you could use the action trigger type for that. Or if you want to set up something based on a given interval, set up a rule that'll run every 30 minutes, or set up something to run on a specific date. These triggers are really good for those types of things. We also have a webhook trigger type within the system. So the webhook allows you to set up rules with specific endpoints for the webhook, and then you can fire in payloads to those and fire off automations based off of that. And I'm going to do a little bit of a demo around that in a little bit. So if we go ahead and let's go ahead and take a look at the rules, actually. I think that's probably the best place to go next. So if we go st2 rule list, you'll see I've loaded one sample rule within this host. It's one of the ones from the example pack. Examples sample with timer. So this is just one that's going to be based off of the interval timer like I had mentioned before. So if we can go ahead and do st2 rule get, and you'll see the definition of the rule. So this is where it points to that it's based off of the interval timer, core.st2.interval timer, and it fires off a local action. And speaking of the local actions, I want to go ahead and run one of those. So if we do an st2 run core.local hostname, what this essentially is this is just running a local shell command, and then the parameter that I pass in, the argument at the end, is just the command that I want to run. The format for using the CLI to run commands is st2 run, and then it's pack name dot action, and then any parameters that you need, either positional or key value. So I'll go ahead and I'll run this here. and we will see that it returns back to me with the execution ID, the status of that particular execution, and then the full results payload. So it tells me what was outputted to standard out, if there's anything to standard error, return code, all sorts of useful information. If we say we need to retrieve this again, right, we can actually use the ST2 execution list, and this is the full history of everything that's been run on this particular host. So we can go ahead and take this, and we'll notice that that ID actually matches the ID that we saw up here. And so let's go ahead and take this ID and do st2 execution get. And you'll see that returns the same thing that we saw when we ran that particular action before. If we wanted to know more details around this particular execution, like what were the parameters that were passed in and things like that, we can do it with a -d. And then you'll see here is that command that I passed in on the command line, and start time and end time, and a lot of other really good information. If we take a look at the execution list again, you'll see that some of the executions that are in my execution history have pluses next to them here. And what that means is that this was a workflow. So I can go ahead and I can take one of these, grab this ID, and do an execution get again on this one. And it gives me a separate table that shows me all of the tasks that were in that workflow. And this is really nice because it shows you the full breakdown of the workflow. You'll be able to see exactly which ones succeeded and failed and all of that. And I can actually grab any one of these IDs and do a get on it. And it will show me the full output of that. So here's standard out, standard error, all of that information. So let's go ahead and try running a Cordout Remote action. So Cordout Remote is once again a shell command, but it requires you specify the host that you want it to run on, because this is for remote shell commands. So this is done over SSH. So all of the configuration that was either done via the automatic deployment methods that we have, or if you've done it by hand to make sure that SSH keys were in place, would help here. So if we do S2 Cordout Remote, hosts equal foolish demo foo bar, and let's make the command date this time. We'll see that I get the same general format with the ID and the status succeeded, and then in the results body you'll actually see that it's broken out by host. So it shows me the date that was outputted by foolish demo, the one that was outputted by bar, and the one that was outputted by foo. It's very nice how it's broken down that way, and this is very helpful when you're doing workflow constructions and things like that, but that's a little bit more of an advanced topic that I won't get into in this particular video. So if we go back to the action list, see all of these actions like I showed you in the beginning. You'll see there's a number of Linux commands that are installed out of the box. I've installed a St2 pack on here, so there's a number of St2 actions and things like that. The packs pack is a really neat one that's used for managing content. So you can use the packs.install action to install packs from our contribution repo, or from any other repo, as long as you know the repo and you have access to it, and get content installed and registered within the system. All of the examples that run here. Let's go ahead and run an example workflow here, and we'll do examples.echochain. So if I do st2 run examples.echochain, and I don't know what the parameters are for this, so I can do a -h. You'll see there's no actual parameters that are required for this particular action. So I'm going to go ahead and run it, and I'm going to run it with a -a this time. What -a does is it actually makes it so that the execution will run asynchronously. It gives me the ID, but immediately comes back to the CLI to let me continue working. So if I do st2 execution list, we'll see that last one down here. The ID matches. I can go ahead and do a get on that. Execution get. And it shows me all of the tasks that were within that particular workflow. Let's go ahead and jump over to the UI and take a look at that real quick. log out. So by default, StackStorm will have authentication turned on. So when you go to the UI initially, you will see a login page like this. So I'm going to go ahead and log in with my test user. And I should be taken directly to the history page, which is where you'll see all of the actions that have been executed. Like here's that example.echo chain that we just ran previously. When you click on a particular action within the execution history, it'll show you the output of the action over here on the right. And so for a workflow, you can see the raw results of the entire workflow output, or you can click the arrow to expand it and look at each one of the tasks individually. So when we look at task C1 here, we can see it's a core.local action. And so we'll see all of the action input parameters over here on the right for that core.local action. And then we'll also see the output for that particular action here, which is really nice. So this will show this will show all of the actions that have been executed on the system. Here's that pax.install like we saw earlier with the error and standard output and things like that. Also within the UI, you have the ability to take a look at actions. So all of those same packs that we saw in the action list are shown here on this page. You have the ability to collapse them to make it easier, like so. You could take any one of these actions, like a core.local will say, and you can actually run it directly from the UI. So let's do a uname. We go ahead and click run, and we'll see it show up down here. The output would be shown expanded here, or you can click this little icon here and it will take you back over to the history page and show you all of the executions of that particular action. You have the filtering abilities up here at the top, so you can filter on status or action type, trigger type, or rule, things like that. So let's go ahead and remove the filter so we can see the full execution history again. So say I had ran that action, but it had failed due to something outside of my control, some sort of network issue or things like that, and I wanted to rerun it with all the same parameters. I could click rerun, and it would bring up this screen here, auto-populated with the commands that I had put in before. And then I can go ahead and click run. And then we'll see that it was ran here, same output. So 2 of these in a row. We'll see that it was reran quite easily. That rerun option is also available in the command line as St2 Execution Rerun. Also through the UI, we have the rules. So if we go over the rules tab here, we can see that sample rule that I showed you through the CLI. And right now it happens to be disabled. We look over here on the right, and we'll see all of the information that we saw when we did the rule get, the trigger type and the units and the delta and things like that and everything that you saw, as well as the action that gets run and any parameters for that action. Let's go ahead and edit this particular rule and enable it. And there, you can see that the rule is now enabled within the system, and we'll start firing on a 30-minute interval. You also have the ability to construct new rules through the UI. So if we click the rules plus button next to where it says rules, you can give the rule a name, foo rule. This is the foo rule. Choose whether or not it's enabled by default. Choose the trigger that you want to use. So we'll go ahead and we'll say the interval timer again. Input all of those parameters. You can then input criteria. So if the trigger that's coming in has a payload and you want to match against values from that particular payload, you could input them here. So if the trigger had trigger.bar and I wanted to make sure that it contains Baz, I could add that criteria just like that. And then the actions here. So this is all of the actions that are available within the system. So you could do core.local. And then all of the parameters for that would pop up here. Uname-a. And I could save this particular rule and it would get added. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's say every 3 days. And there's foo rule. And you can see all of the same information over here on the right that we just entered in that form. So let's go ahead and try adding a rule through the CLI. So I have a sample rule here for a webhook. And as I explained earlier, if you create a rule, you define the endpoint for the webhook, and then you're able to post data to that endpoint. So that's going to make a little bit more sense here as I show you. So this is the YAML file for this particular webhook rule, this sample that I want to create. And so it's going to use the core.st2 webhook like we saw earlier. And then it's going to specify that the endpoint is called sample. The criteria for the rule is going to say that there needs to be a parameter within the body of it that's called name, and it needs to equal st2. And if that happens, then it's going to fire off this core.local action to echo out to this particular file. So let's go ahead and create that rule. st2 rule create. Now if we do an st2 rule list, we'll see that the webhook one is there already. And it also shows up over here on the UI. So now what we can do is we can actually test out, let's jump over the history so we can watch from here. We can actually test out that new webhook that we set up with a curl command. So I have a curl command that I've saved here. First let me show you that there's actually a parameter you can pass for the CLI to take a look at the webhooks. So if we do an st2 webhook list, we'll see that that webhook was created just like we had set up within the rule. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and hit that endpoint with a curl command. I happen to have it stored here in Notepad because I would fat finger it. There's no way I could type this, especially while recording. So you'll see that I'm going to go ahead and post to the webhooks/sample endpoint. I'm going to pass in a payload of the name and equals st2 because that's what the rule was looking for, and then just our other arbitrary data. I also have to specify my authorization token as one of the headers. So let's go ahead and run this real quick. And you'll see it came back, it just echoed back to me the same data. So if we jump over to the execution list, we should see that an execution was ran. And so you can see it was actually ran by the Stanley user because it was executed by a rule instead of executed by me. So if we say st2 execution get, it succeeded. st2.web. And so there's the output that we happen to have put within that file. So we can also jump over to the UI here and see that same thing here. So we can see that the core.local ran. It was fired by the examples.webhook file rule. Here is the trigger payload. So this is what I sent in. A bunch of other information. There's the body that I sent in. And here's the command that ran. So the webhook can be especially useful for things like monitoring systems. So if you have a monitoring system like St2 or Nagios or something like that, and what you can do is you can actually take and set up an event handler, and that event handler will fire in all the events to the system, and then you can set up rules to match off of those different events and things like that. So what I like to do is I like to fire hose all of the events from St2 into the system and then use different rules to decide whether those are actionable for auto remediation or need to be escalated to a human or things like that. All right, that wraps up our StackStorm 101 video. I'd like to thank you guys for hanging in with me till the end. We're really excited to see everyone playing with it and all of the adoption. So please go check out our docs site. It is docs.stackstorm.com. All of the information about our system is out there. It shows you how to get started, shows you how to set up the rules and everything else, and there's a lot of really good information out there on the docs site. If you do have questions, you can contact us. We're Twitter at stack_storm, support at stackstorm.com, or we're on IRC on Freenode #StackStorm, or check us out on our new Slack community, StackStorm -community. Thank you very much.